So I guess uh, quite a few of you have joined. So I'll begin. I hope the others who are late can join in. So in this, I know the situation around is very bad in this pandemic. Hope you all are fine, staying at home, staying safe. So, the attendance today, the dip in the attendance is a cause of concern today because every day the attendance was 80 to 90%, and today I find so low attendance. So I wonder why, what is the reason? I hope the message is being circulated properly regarding the timings of lecture, or it
Yes, ma'am,
can
it has
be
been separated.
okay. So maybe that those who have not joined, maybe they are not well. Is it?
No, no, ma'am, not all.
Okay. So
Ma'am, actually,
what is
there
it?
is a test today, so maybe that's the reason.
Oh, they are studying for the test. So the test is
Maybe,
today, 2 to 4.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So, okay, today the topic is congestive heart failure. I'll begin. This topic, the drugs used in congestive heart failure, will be dealt in two lectures. So, the competency that will be addressed is mechanism of action, do, doses, side effects, indications, and contraindications of drugs used in heart failure. Okay, so this is the competency that is being discussed. I will again repeat the competency again in the next lecture because we'll be taking two lectures. So in the first lecture, I'll give you a brief outline about the heart failure, what is heart failure, and the pathophysiology of it, and the prototype drug. We will discuss one drug today, and in the next lecture we will discuss uh, an overall management of congestive heart failure and all the drugs in short, the drugs, all the other drugs in short, which are used for the treatment of congestive heart failure. So today I will briefly discuss the pathophysiology and one drug, the main drug, the prototype drug, that is digoxin. So, as the name suggests, heart failure. Heart failure is the, what is heart failure? See, in the name there is failure. So, heart is a pump. So, when the heart fails to pump blood adequately, where does it pump the blood? From the heart to the systemic circulation, so that the blood supply to the vital organs is maintained. So when the heart is unable to do that, that is a failure on the part of the heart. So that is called heart failure. So if you describe, it is the progressive inability of the heart to supply adequate blood flow to the vital organs. And the classical symptom that is presented, that the patient is presented with, is fluid retention, and it is the leading cause of mortality and morbidity. The cardiovascular compromise, it is one of the leading cause, heart failure, when the heart is unable to pump adequately. So the patient will present with shortness of breath, dyspnea, which we call edema, fatigue. These are all because there is inadequate exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and there is compromise in oxygenation. The patient experiences fatigue. So shortness of fatigue, shortness of breath, edema and fatigue. So the causes of this heart failure, what can be, why will this heart, which is such an effective pump, be unable to pump blood? The heart itself may be suffering because its main supplying artery, the coronary artery, may be diseased, may be having pathology. So, then hypertension, various other metabolic reasons like diabetes, then mitral valve disease, etc. So there are various reasons, but this is what is heart failure. Now, if you see this picture, this is the picture of a normal heart. So you all know from your knowledge of physiology that the heart receives blood from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, and this blood reaches the right atrium. From the right atrium, it comes to the right ventricle. Then from the ventricle, as this picture shows, the deoxygenated blood reaches through the pulmonary artery. Yes. Yes, there's a lot of talking going on. I request all of you to be on mute. Only when I am asking you something, you can unmute yourself and answer. Okay, so the blood, the deoxygenated blood, which is brought from the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, reaches the right ventricle, and from there it reaches the lungs through the pulmonary artery. From the lungs, after the gaseous exchange, the oxygenated blood from the pulmonary vein, it reaches the left atrium, and from the left atrium, it reaches the left ventricle through this opening, the mitral valve, and from here through the aorta to the systemic circulation. So this is nothing new which I have told you, you know this. So why I am telling you is when the blood is not being ejected out from the left ventricle through the aorta into the systemic circulation, there occurs accumulation of blood after every systole, because the ejection fraction is reduced bit by bit in heart failure. So because of this accumulation, then there is a backflow, and there is then accumulation in the left atrium also, then slowly accumulation in the lungs, which is called pulmonary congestion, pulmonary edema, which again backflows, and there is accumulation in the left ventricle. So it begins with the left side of the heart, and it spreads to the right side of the heart as well. So ultimately, the left-sided heart failure then becomes a complete heart failure. So this picture shows how this the muscles, you see the size, the walls of the left ventricle and the right ventricle, and this contraction is facilitated with the help of papillary muscles, the chordae tendineae. So when the heart is unable to pump blood, there slowly occurs a thickening of this myocardium and the decrease in the lumen as well. So after a period of time in heart failure, this is what happens to the muscles. There is thickening. There is cardiac remodeling. So we need to treat heart failure so that this condition does not arise, or we need to retard this process. Now, if we explain this further, that when there is left ventricular dysfunction, okay, this can happen. Why will this left ventricular dysfunction happen? It can happen in case of, say, hypertension, when there is some kind of a viral infection, when there is myocardial ischemia, which we dealt with in the last lecture. Then there is less blood pumped into the systemic circulation. As a result, there is reduction in the circulating volume, and the pressure, the pressure which is perceived in the renal arteries is less. Now, as a result, you know that when the renal blood pressure decreases, then the renin-angiotensin system is activated, renin release is stimulated. As a result, with the stimulation of renin, there will be increased production of angiotensin 1, angiotensin 2. So, as a result, increased sympathetic tone. So, these are the processes which take place. Okay. Now, as a result of angiotensin, production of angiotensin, we know that there occurs vasoconstriction and salt and water retention. Okay, so this then further will help to cause edema. As such, the heart is not able to pump, and then with the production of angiotensin, there will be further salt and water retention. So there is overall, as a result, what happens is that due to the compensatory mechanisms taking place in the body, in a frantic attempt to pump more and more blood, there occurs hypertrophy and remodeling of the muscles of the heart. So there occurs remodeling. So this is the pathology that occurs. So we can inhibit these processes at correct places. So when we need to enhance the contractility of the left ventricle, we can give inotropic agents. When the reduction in the circulating volume and reduction in the renal pressure is being perceived, then we can give AC inhibitors. When there is increased synthesis of angiotensin 2, then we can give drugs like AC inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, beta blockers. Similarly, we can give diuretics to prevent the salt and water retention, in addition to AC inhibitors and angiotensin 1 antagonists. So this picture also shows, in fact, it is also a pictorial representation of the same thing, that a decrease in cardiac output will cause decrease in the renal perfusion pressure. This decrease in renal perfusion pressure will trigger the neurohormonal activation. Okay, that is, it will activate the renin-angiotensin system, which is ultimately resulting in the salt and water retention and vasoconstriction, because aldosterone release is stimulated. And then there occurs edema, congestion. So we can then intervene at correct points by giving inotropes to pep up the cardiac output. We can give vasopressors when we need to pep up the renal perfusion pressure. When there is neurohormonal activation, then we can give drugs like which act on the renin-angiotensin system. To prevent salt and water retention, and vasoconstriction, we can give vasodilators and aldosterone antagonists. Now, congestive symptoms are relieved by diuretics. So this is how we can break the vicious cycle of heart failure. So mainly, what are the drugs for heart failure? Okay, mainly you have to remember that we can give vasodilators because there is congestion. So to relieve the congestive symptoms, we can give vasodilators like ACE inhibitors, ARBs. We can give diuretics because diuretics, as the name suggests, they will cause increased urine production, loss of water and sodium. Sodium and water loss. So when there is already congestion, then diuretics will help. Beta blockers, they reduce the oxygen, myocardial oxygen demand. And then digoxin or cardiac glycosides. Digoxin or cardiac glycosides, they belong to the group of inotropic agents, that the agents which increase the contractility of the heart. So in this group, there are glycosides like digoxin, and there are other inotropes also like dobutamine, milrinone, amrinone. So you see, the drugs for heart failure can be classified into inotropic agents. If we go back to this slide, inotropic agents, okay. Inotropes में these vasopressors are also like vasopressors like dopamine, dobutamine. They can also be called inotropes. Then we can give diuretics. We can give vasodilators. Okay, so these are the basic group of drugs, and obviously there are other drugs like beta blockers, EC inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, which can also be given for the treatment of heart failure. So today we will be mainly discussing digoxin. Okay, because digoxin is for the treatment of heart failure. Digoxin is important for you to know. Though digoxin, because of its multiple side effects, it is not given that much now, but it has a lot of importance and it is asked in the exam. So to digoxin, you have to understand the mechanism of action. First and foremost, the mechanism of action of digoxin. So what you have to know is that digoxin, it inhibits the sodium potassium ATPase pump. And first you have to understand that digoxin is an inotropic agent. So inotropic agent matlab, what do you understand by inotrop, chronotrop?
Ma'am, the one that increases the pushing of the heart, like the contractive ability of the heart.
Yes, yes, very good. So, see, when the heart is failing, that is, the heart is not able to pump out blood as much as it should. So, if we give any drug which is increasing the contractility of the heart, that will help, isn't it? So, how does digoxin help in that? What is the mechanism? So, digoxin, no doubt, it increases the force of contraction, but it does so by inhibiting this sodium potassium ATPase. Now this left side picture, there are two pictures you see on the left and the right. The left one is a normal picture when the heart is not failing, when we have not given digoxin. So what happens is, normally the sodium potassium ATPase is active and it acts as a pump. It acts as a pump, that means it helps to pump out sodium ion and pump in potassium. Okay, so this balance is maintained, pumps out sodium and pumps in potassium. Now, when sodium is pumped out, then in the vicinity, there is another sodium calcium exchange pump. So to maintain the sodium balance, this pump is also active, wherein sodium is pumped in exchange for calcium. Okay, so sodium, first this pump is sodium potassium ATPase is active, wherein sodium is pumped out, potassium is pumped in. When there is a sodium deficit here, then that is made up by sodium influx through the sodium calcium exchange, wherein this sodium is coming in and calcium is pumped out. And in addition, there are other calcium channels also which are active. Okay, so this digitalis, it selectively binds. Here you see this digitalis is going and binding with this sodium potassium ATPase. It binds to the extracellular phase of the sodium potassium ATPase, which is present in the myocardial fibers, and inhibits this enzyme. And when this cation pump this is a cation pump, it is inhibited, it results in the accumulation of sodium, obviously, because the sodium won't be pumped out, it will remain inside. The potassium will not come in, it will remain outside. So what will happen is this sodium, which would have otherwise been pumped out, remains inside the cell. So it causes progressive accumulation of sodium intracellularly. And indirectly what happens, since there is no deficit of sodium now inside, so this sodium calcium exchange will also not take place. So this indirectly results in the intracellular accumulation of calcium, because then this sodium exchange will not take place. What was this exchange? Ki sodium used to be pumped in and calcium used to be pumped out. So this sodium will not be pumped in now and this calcium will not be pumped out. So ultimately what is happening is that this calcium is getting accumulated. This is our net gain, that calcium accumulation. Now during depolarization, the calcium ions, they enter the cell because there is a steep calcium gradient and there are L-type calcium channels also active in the myocardial fibers. So because of the L-type calcium channels, there is entry of calcium, and this triggers the release of large amount of calcium which is stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum through a calcium activated calcium channel, which is known as the ryanodine receptor calcium channel, RYR2. We can go to the next. This is also a similar picture, but let me finish this first. So in addition to these two things, the sodium potassium ATPase and sodium calcium exchange, there are other L-type calcium channels also which you need to remember. So depolarization will trigger the release of large amount of calcium which is stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay? And this occurs through a calcium channel which is a ryanodine receptor calcium channel, and this is activated by calcium itself. So this calcium channel is activated by calcium itself, so it is called calcium activated calcium channel. So what is the net result? What is the net result is that the cytosolic calcium increases, triggering contraction, because you know that when there will be increase in calcium, the troponin T will be activated and there will be contraction. So this is the basic mechanism. So if you go to this next picture also, it is the same thing which has been depicted. The sodium potassium ATPase pump is being inhibited here. As a result, sodium is not being pumped out, potassium is not being pumped in, accumulation of sodium. As a result, this sodium which was being pumped in and calcium pumped out will not take place, and there is accumulation of cytosolic calcium. Then there is release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and there L-type calcium channels. There is influx of calcium channels as calcium ions as well. Okay. So this is basic. This is what you have to understand basically. So the excess calcium which is remaining in the cytosol is then taken up into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which slowly gets progressively loaded with more and more calcium, so that the subsequent calcium transients are augmented. So there is slowly the cumulative effect increases. So as a result of this increase in calcium loading in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, the force of contraction increases slowly. So the relationship of sodium and calcium is such that the small percentage of increase in the sodium concentration will lead to a large increase in the calcium concentration. So it has to be kept in mind that this inhibition of this enzyme, sodium potassium ATPase, is slow, and this loading of calcium here, it is a slow process. It occurs gradually, and the inotropic effect of digitalis, which we are discussing now, it takes hours to develop. Okay, so it takes time for the maximum effect of digoxin to reach. So this, I hope, is clear, because understanding of this mechanism is very important. Very often it is asked in as an explain by question also, or a role of digoxin in heart failure. So it is important that you understand. Now, digoxin has inotropic as well as vagal and sympathetic effects. So, you see that it is no doubt it is increasing. This picture shows that it is having a positive inotropic effect on the heart. Okay, so since there is since the contraction in the heart is then interplay of ions, calcium, sodium, and potassium, and digoxin is affecting all. So there is a chance of toxic arrhythmias with the use of digoxin. So digoxin has to be used cautiously. Now, digoxin has a vagomimetic effect. That is, it stimulates the vagus. As a result, it has been seen that digoxin, it reduces the heart rate. Then digoxin has some sympatho-inhibitory effect, it has been found. It can also cause inhibition of RAS to some extent, and diuresis. So if we discuss the pharmacology of digoxin, so the main mechanism is inhibition of the sodium potassium ATPase pump. So the sodium potassium ATPase pump inhibition ultimately causes the increase in the cytosolic calcium. Then digoxin helps to restore the vagal tone and abolishes the sympathetic overactivity, and it has a mild vasoconstriction action. So it helps in CHF patients, because in CHF patients, when the heart is gradually failing, there is, as a compensatory mechanism, there is gradual increase in the sympathetic activity. The heart tries to pep up the sympathetic activity to make up for the cardiac output by increasing the heart rate. So in digoxin, it is the reflex sympathetic activity sometimes is withdrawn. In kidney, it is seen that diuresis is seen promptly secondary to the improvement in circulation and perfusion. There, it also has certain CNS effects, though not at the therapeutic dose. At very high dose, it can cause nausea, vomiting by stimulating the chemoreceptor trigger zone, by activating the CTZ, the chemoreceptor trigger zone. And if it is given in even higher dose, then it can cause hypercapnia, central sympathetic stimulation, mental confusion, and visual disturbance. So you see that this digoxin has side effects. So the pharmacological actions of digoxin. So this digoxin, it causes a dose-dependent increase in the force of contraction. It is an inotropic drug, we have discussed. So if you see this graph, wherein in the x-axis we have plotted the stroke volume, and on the on the y-axis, and on the x-axis there is an end diastolic pressure, that is the preload. This is in fact the end diastolic. It in a way signifies the pressure, the ventricular pressure. So with the increase in the ventricular pressure, how much blood is being pumped out. So this green line is showing the normal stroke volume, the normal ejection. But when the heart is failing, it is like this red line. With the increase in the pressure, the stroke volume is not increasing much. So when we are digitalizing the heart, we have found that it is regaining its capacity by the mechanism we just discussed, that is by inhibiting the sodium potassium ATPase enzyme and by causing this accumulation of calcium. I did not explain you the molecular mechanisms. I only said, what I explained was only a brief outline, that the sodium potassium ATPase was inhibited and the sodium calcium exchange was inhibited. But there are certain molecular mechanisms also, like the trigger of the release of large amount of calcium stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum through the calcium activated calcium channel ryanodine receptor, and there is cytosolic increase of calcium transiently. Then there is contraction of the myofibrils, because the troponin C will be activated. Then the sarcoplasmic, now there is a protein which is called SERCA, SERCA, sarcoplasmic endoplasmic reticular calcium ATPase 2. This helps to pump back calcium into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. क्योंकि sarcoplasmic reticulum is after all the storehouse of calcium. Okay, this calcium, it is bound. It is in the bound form. Bound form matlab it is sequestrated. So it is sequestrated with a protein which is called calsequestrin, calsequestrin. So this you have to remember. So this is the main thing which is playing, and as we increase the dose of digoxin, the more and more calcium will get accumulated in this sarcoplasmic reticulum with the role of this ryanodine receptor channel, with the SERCA, which then after pumps back calcium into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So the digoxin shortens the systole and the diastole is prolonged. So in a failing heart, we find that when it is given, it to some extent it helps to increase the stroke volume, though not to normal levels, but it helps to make up for the decrease in the stroke volume. The tone of the heart, it has been found that the digitalis decreases the end diastolic size of the phallic ventricle. As a consequence, there is better ventricular emptying and reduction in the filling pressure. Hence, the tone as such is not affected, but there is better ventricular emptying. So it has it has an effect on the rate, that is, it decreases the rate. So digoxin decreases the rate. Digoxin causes bradycardia. So this is one thing which you have to keep in mind, that the heart rate will be decreased. And why it does so? Because it acts through vagus. It restores the vagus tone, and this increase in the vagal tone through the nodose ganglion will stabilize it will sensitize the baroreceptors, and it causes direct stimulation of the vagal center, And the SA node, which is the main seat of depolarization by acting as a pacemaker, it sensitizes the SA node to acetylcholine. And you know that acetylcholine helps to reduce the tone. So it acts through vagus in order to cause bradycardia. So it has certain electrophysiological properties as well. See, the resting membrane potential. We will be discussing drugs used in arrhythmia and the cardiac rhythm also in the coming lectures. But just for your knowledge, the resting membrane potential of the heart is shifted towards zero, as is shown in this picture, in this graph. So digoxin helps to alter the electrophysiological properties also. You know, this is why the use of digoxin has slowly and slowly over the decades has been reduced. अगर किसी हार्ट फेलियर पेशेंट को अभी हम देखते हैं तो हम स्ट्रेट अवे डिगॉक्सिन नहीं देते हैं. We give similar drugs. It's important for you to know कि what do we look for in drugs when we want to treat patients of heart failure. But we don't give digoxin per se now. Why? Because one of the main reason is that it alters the electrophysiological properties. The resting membrane potential is progressively shifted towards the isoelectric level. So the refractory period, you must be aware of the meaning of this word. The refractory period is altered. The atrium, in the atrium what happens is, due to the action of the vagus, there is heterogeneous action, and the transmission of conduction, the rate of transmission of conduction from the SA node to the AV node and bundle of it, that rate is reduced. You know that the cardiac impulse originates from the pacemaker, that is the SA node. From there it transmits to the AV node. From the AV node it comes to the bundle of His, and from the bundle of His to the Purkinje fiber. So this is the route of transmission. So this rate of transmission is reduced. It is causing bradycardia, and the rate of transmission is also reduced. So the excitability, the excitability of the heart is low. At low dose it is enhanced, but at high dose it is depressed. So the conduction, if you say that the AV conduction, basically conduction through the AV node is reduced. तो मान लीजिए एक पेशेंट एक पार्शियल हार्ट ब्लॉक में है. There is a partial heart block. On top of that, you have given digitalis. That is, the conduction of impulse through the AV node is slowed further. Already there is partial heart block. On top of that, there is AV conduction slowing. So what can happen is, dangerously, digoxin can convert a partial heart block into a complete heart block. So one has to be cautious. So cardiac glycosides like digoxin, digitoxin, they are used interchangeably. Okay, so you have to know that. Digoxin, it increases the refractoriness of AV node, and thus it decreases the ventricular response to the atrial rate. So that is why there is a condition, atrial fibrillation, when there is very high rate of very high atrial rate. Okay, the contraction in the atrial occurs at a very high rate. So you know that the contraction, that impulse has to travel through the AV node to the ventricle in order to cause the ventricular contraction. So for the transmission to take place from the atrium to the ventricle, the conduction impulse has to cross through the AV node. So if this refractoriness is increased at the AV node, so it helps to decrease the ventricular response, and this is helpful in patients of atrial fibrillation. So congestive heart failure triggers many arrhythmias. So digoxin can help in that state. So before I go into the pharmacokinetics, I would just like to tell you that this digoxin, digitoxin, they're all cardiac glycosides. Okay? And the plant source is Digitalis lanata for digoxin, Digitalis purpurea for digitoxin, and there is another obane from which is obtained from Strophanthus gratis. So mainly we ask, sometimes you are asked, what is the plant? Name the plant from which you get digoxin, from which you get digitoxin. So they are cardiac glycosides. Okay. So we are not discussing digoxin per se or digitoxin. We are discussing cardiac glycosides. So that is why I am using this digoxin and digitoxin interchangeably. Okay. So just for your knowledge, you should know this name, digitoxin and digoxin, Digitalis lanata and Digitalis purpurea. So little bit about the pharmacokinetics, that it is lipid soluble, polar in nature, and this food can delay the absorption. And digoxin, if you remember G Pharma, general pharmacology, so you have come across this term, volume of distribution. So digoxin or digitoxin is one of those drugs which has a very high volume of distribution. I hope I don't need to explain what is volume of distribution. Hope you remember. Yes? Because this this is asked very often. In fact, you can say in 60-70% of cases we will ask this question. Define volume of distribution. What do you understand by apparent volume of distribution? Why do we call it apparent? Why is it not absolute? And we also ask, name some drugs which have high volume of distribution. So we expect to hear from you at least digoxin and chloroquine. Very, very common. Chloroquine used for the treatment of malaria and digoxin for heart failure. So we expect that you will say at least these two names, because as you study pharmacology, as you proceed into studying the different systemic pharmacology topics, you will come across various other drugs also which have high volume of distribution, but these are the two most important ones. So digoxin has a very high volume of distribution. It is primarily metabolized in liver, undergoes enterohepatic circulation, so, and it is excreted through kidney. So if the patient is compromised renally, there is renal insufficiency, so you have to decrease the dose, because then there will be increased chance of toxicity, and we have discussed that digoxin is a toxic. It has high toxicity. And I have already explained during explaining the mechanism of action is that they are cumulative drugs. Ek baar mein the maximum contraction is not achieved. The maintenance dose is given at a steady state level, and it takes days together to attain the full therapeutic effect, because हर बार थोड़ा थोड़ा कैल्शियम accumulate हो रहा है sarcoplasmic reticulum में. So it has been shown that it takes many days for the full potency, the maximum efficacy to be observed. Now coming to the very important part, the adverse effects of digoxin, why its use slowly decreased. Nausea, vomiting to hai. It causes nausea, vomiting. Not like when we ask the students the side effects, they generally write nausea, vomiting for all drugs. But in digoxin, it is actually one of the very serious side effects, because it stimulates the chemoreceptor trigger zone. Then it also causes gynecomastia, visual disturbances, the red and yellow vision. That is, it can cause psychosis, the neuropsychiatric disturbances take place. Fatigue, malaise, headache, mental confusion. These are the effects that can take place. Then there is chance of ventricular arrhythmia, AV block and bradycardia. Now calcium channel blockers like verapamil and potassium channel openers like amiodarone, they can increase the plasma concentration of digoxin by inhibiting its excretion. ठीक है? So digoxin जो है, it can, the effect is increased by potassium. तो अगर हाइपरकैलेमिया है, अगर हाइपरकैलेमिया हो रहा है तो डिगॉक्सिन का इफेक्ट ज्यादा हो जाएगा. So amiodarone and verapamil, they can increase the plasma concentration of digoxin by inhibiting its excretion. So this is the effect this amiodarone and verapamil has. So you see, when there is hypokalemia, so we should not give digoxin when there is hypokalemia, because if we go back, sodium, potassium, ATPase, when it is being inhibited, sodium is not being pumped out, potassium is not being pumped in. Okay. So if there is hypokalemia, then the toxicity of digoxin will be increased even further. Contraindications में होगा, you should be very cautious in case of hypokalemia, when there is renal disease, because metabolism is through liver and excretion is through kidney. Then it itself can cause, since it is altering the levels of sodium, potassium. And why hypokalemia is dangerous for digoxin is because hypokalemia causes increased affinity of the binding of digoxin with the sodium potassium ATPase. Hypokalemia, it is a favorable condition of binding, so it can be dangerous. Then thyrotoxicosis, because thyrotoxicosis is already a reason for arrhythmias because of increased heart rate, tachycardia. Similarly, myxedema, ventricular tachycardias, partial AV block, like I said, if there is already a partial block, it can get converted into a complete block because digoxin reduces the rate of conduction. It should not be given in condition called Wolff-Parkinson's-White syndrome, because this is a condition wherein there is an aberrant pathway, a bypass pathway between the atrium and the ventricle. So that is a reason for arrhythmia. So as such, digoxin can cause arrhythmias. It causes a condition called ventricular bigeminis. So we should not give digoxin. So there is a condition called digoxin toxicity which very often occurs. So you should know, sometimes we ask how do we treat digoxin toxicity. So digoxin toxicity can be treated first. First you have to understand what has caused the digoxin toxicity. So the manifestations can be tachyarrhythmia, it can be ventricular arrhythmia, it can be supraventricular arrhythmia, it can be AV block. So when cardiac toxicity, digoxin toxicity can occur, we have to deal with each and every symptom. So for tachyarrhythmia, we can give potassium chloride. So generally hypokalemia triggers this toxicity. So you have to infuse potassium chloride. to give potassium chloride infusion at 20 to 100 millimole per hour. Then for ventricular ventricular arrhythmias, you can give ventricular antiarrhythmics like lignocaine, quinidine, procainamide. For supraventricular tachycardias, propranolol can be given. For AV block, atropine can be given. And now there is a antibody, digoxin antibody by the name of Digibind, Digifab or Digibind. It is a digoxin specific antibody which is highly effective in reversing the cardiotoxicity. So what is it actually? It is the Fab fragment. The Fab fragment which has been marketed as the digoxin. It binds with the digoxin and it prevents its action. So it is non-immunogenic. It will not trigger the formation of this antibody because it is only the Fab fragment. There is no FC fragment which is immunogenic. So it is given by IV infusion to treat digoxin toxicity. So you should know what to write when you're asked about digoxin toxicity. First, for tachyarrhythmias, potassium chloride. Then for ventricular arrhythmias, lignocaine, phenytoin. For AV block, you can give atropine and also antibody treatment like Digibind. Okay, so today I'll be stopping here. The next class I will go on with other drugs used for the treatment of heart failure. So what we have discussed today is in short about the pathophysiology of heart failure and the main drug, that is digoxin, the inotropic drug, the cardiac glycosides, in which we have discussed digoxin. So I am yes, are these questions? I can find many responses in the chat.